Hello, it's Zeke with the Eastside Church of Christ in Baytown, Texas. Thanks for joining us for the Eastside 5x5x5 Bible reading, where we'll spend 5 minutes in reading, 5 minutes reflecting, 5 minutes in prayer every weekday. This week is for the week of July 4th through the 10th, 2021, and we are completing our reading in 1 Timothy. We'll be looking at chapter 6 this week, and then reading all 4 chapters of the second letter to Timothy. So let's talk about what Paul has to say to his younger protege, Timothy. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, Paul continues his advice to Timothy about relationships. He says that slaves ought to serve their masters because they want to and not because they expect some kind of preferential treatment from them. The apostle speaks bluntly about those who think preaching is an easy way to make money, while calling to mind that money can be the source of many problems. He reminds the rich that their money can be a resource for good, so they should be generous and willing to share. Timothy is charged again to be faithful to the purpose of God's word. You may remember that this is how Paul began this letter in the first few verses of 1 Timothy chapter 1. As we move on into 2 Timothy, this letter seems to take on particular weight since the letter are the last words that we have from the apostle's pen, and Paul knows that his earthly life is near its end. As he begins 2 Timothy, he expresses his deep love for Timothy, as well as his appreciation for Timothy's faith, which was instilled by his godly mother and grandmother. And as in the first letter, Timothy is admonished to be faithful to the gospel because some have turned away from it, and because of that have suffered the consequences. Chapter 2 of 2 Timothy has Paul reminding him of the hardship that accompanies commitment to the gospel. He calls for disciplined attention as a soldier or as an athlete or as a farmer. And Paul stresses to Timothy God's faithfulness while reminding him of a couple of men who have departed from the truth and now teach error. But God knows those who are his, and God's servant must watch his actions and attitudes carefully so as not to become contaminated. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, Paul starkly predicts that times will get increasingly difficult because of the corruption of bad men. They'll have a corrupted faith, which expresses itself in corrupted behavior. Timothy, however, has a unique character because of his diligence to follow the apostles' example and his mother's teaching from the scriptures. Verses 16 and 17 of 2 Timothy 3 famously remark that God's word contains everything we need for everything we do. In the last section, 2 Timothy chapter 4, Paul strongly exhorts Timothy to be ready with the truth, whether the time seems opportune or not. Timothy must do the work of an evangelist, and Paul provides his own testimony of dedicated work and expectant hope. Paul's conclusion of the letter cites some disappointments, such as Demas, who has deserted the work, and some encouragements, such as Mark, who had once deserted the work, but has since rejoined it. Finally, the letter concludes with a triumphant statement of Paul's continued trust and reliance on the Lord. There's so much to consider in our reading this week, and I hope you'll take the 15 minutes every day, your 5 minutes in reading, your 5 minutes in reflection, and 5 minutes responding to God in prayer as we continue the Eastside 5x5x5 Bible reading. Thanks, and we'll see you next time. God bless you.